Curious George flies a kite. This is George. He lives in the house of the man with the yellow hat. George is a little monkey, and all monkeys are curious. But no monkey is as curious as George. That is why his name is Curious George. I have to go out now, said the man with the yellow hat. Be a good little monkey till I come back. Have fun and play with your ball, but do not get too curious. And the man went out. It was a lot of fun for George to play with his new ball. The ball went up and George went up. The ball went down and George went down. George could do a lot of tricks with his ball too. This was one of the tricks. He could go up and the ball like this, or do it this way and his head down. This was another trick George could do. He could hold the ball on his head like this. Look, no hand. What a good trick. But where did the ball go? George ran after it. The ball has gone into another room. There was a big window in the room. George liked to look out of that window. He could see a lot from there. He let the ball go and looked out. George could see Bill on his bike and the lake with the boat in it. George could see a big house in a little garden, and a little house with a big garden. The big house was the house where Bill lived, but who lived in the little house? George was curious. Who could live in a house so little? George had to find out, so he went into the big garden. The garden had a big wall, but not too high for a monkey. George got up on the wall. All he had to do now was jump down. So George jumped down into the big garden. Now he could take a good look at the little house. And what did he see? A big white bunny and a lot of little bunnies. George looked and looked and looked. Bunnies were something new to him. How funny they were. The big bunny was Mother Bunny. She was as big as George, but the little bunnies were so little that George could hold one of them in his hand, and that is what he wanted to do. How can he get a bunny out of the house? A house must have a door to get in and out. But where was the door to the bunny house? Oh, here it was. George put his hand and took out a baby bunny. What fun it was to hold the baby bunny, and the bunny did not mind. It sat in his hand, one ear up and one ear down. It looked at George, and George looked back. Now he and the bunny could play in the garden. They could play a game. They could play Get the Bunny. George would let the bunny hop away. Then he would run after it and get it back. George put the bunny down. Then he looked away. 1, 2, run! The bunny was off like a shot. George did not look. Now he had to wait a little bit. 1, 2, 3, 4. He waited. Then George looked up. Where was the bunny? He could not see it. Where was it? Where has it gone? George looked for it here. George looked for it there. He could not find it. Where was the bunny? It could not get out of the garden. It could not get up the wall the way George could. It could not fly away. It had to be here. But it was not. The bunny was gone. And all the fun was gone, too. George sat down. He had been a bad little monkey. Why was he so curious? Why did he let the bunny go? Now he could not put it back in the bunny house where it could be with Mother Bunny. Mother Bunny! George looked up. Why, that was it. Mother Bunny could help him. George got up. He had to have some string. Maybe there was some in the garden. Yes, there was string, and a good one too. George took the string and went back to the bunny house. Mother Bunny was at the door. George let her out and put the string on her. Mother Bunny knew what to do. Away she went with her head down and her ears up. All George could do was hold the string and run after her. And then Mother Bunny sat down. She saw something, and George saw it too. Something white that looked like a tail, like the tail of a white bunny. And that's what it was. But where was the rest of the bunny? It was down in a hole. A bunny likes to dig a hole and then go down and live in it. But this bunny was too little to live in a hole. It should live in a bunny house. So George got hold of the little white tail and pulled the baby bunny out. Then they all ran back to the bunny house. George did not have to put a string on the baby bunny. It ran after its mother all the way home. George took the string off Mother Bunny and helped them back into the house. Then Mother Bunny and all the little ones lay down to sleep. George looked on at them. It was good to see the baby bunny back where it should be. Now George would go back to where he should be. When he came to the wall, he could see something funny in back of it. George got up on the wall to find out what it was. He saw a long string on a long stick. A fat man had the long string in his hand. What could the man do with a stick that long? George was curious. The fat man was on his way to the lake, and soon George was on his way to the lake too. The man took a hook out of his box, put on the string, and then put something on the hook. Then the man let the string down into the water and waited. Now George knew the string on the stick was to fish with. When the man pulled the string out of the water, there was a big fish on the hook. George saw the man pull one fish after another out of the lake, till he had all the fish he wanted. What fun it must be to fish! George wanted to fish too. He had his string, all he needed was a stick. He knew where to get that. George ran home as fast as he could. In the kitchen, he took the map off the kitchen wall. The map would make a good stick. Now George had the string on the stick. He was all set to fish. Or was he? Not yet. George had to have a hook, and on the hook something that fish like to eat. Fish like cake, and George knew where to find some. But where could he get a hook? Why, there was a hook for the map on the kitchen wall. It would have to come out. With the hook on the string and the string on the stick and the cake in the box in his hands, George went to the lake. George sat down, put some cake on the hook, and let the line down into the water. Now he had to wait, just as a man waited. George was curious. The fish were curious too. All kinds of fish came to look at the line. Big fish and little fish, fat fish, thin fish, red fish and yellow fish, and blue fish. One of them was near the hook. The cake was just what he wanted. George sat and waited. Then the line shook. There must be fish on the hook. George pulled the line up. The cake was gone, but there was no fish on the hook. Too bad. George put more cake on the hook. Maybe this time he will get a fish. But no, the fish just took the cake off the hook and it went away. Well, if George cannot get the fish will not get the cake. George will eat it. He likes cake too. He would find another way to get a fish. George looked in the water. The big red one there with the long tail. It was so near. Maybe he could get it with his hands. George went down as low as he could and put out his hand.